I always take the same bus after work. Line 13. Dawn. That time when the city seems to breathe differently, more slowly, as if it were exhaling the last breaths of the day. It is in this silence that I found a little peace. The seats are almost always empty. The wet road reflects the headlights. The rhythmic sound of the engine lulls my thoughts. It was a simple, almost sacred ritual. But that night, something was off. The bus looked too old, as if it had been unearthed from a forgotten time. The rusty bodywork, the dim lights, and a strong, musty smell mixed with burnt oil. Still, I went in. It was my usual route, and I just wanted to get home. The driver, a man with a blank expression and hard gaze, wore an old suit, dark and dusty. He didn't say anything, not even a good night, not even looking me in the eye. He just pressed the button to open the door and let me in. The inside of the bus seemed darker than usual. The interior lights flickered faintly, and the seats were worn, as if no one had used them in years. I walked to my usual spot by the window and sat down. When the doors closed behind me with a sharp click, the sound echoed inside like a muffled gunshot. And that's when I felt it wasn't just another trip. There was something wrong, something I still couldn't explain. The engine roared and the bus began to move. I looked around, expecting to see one or two passengers scattered about as usual, but there were more people there than usual, and they all looked strange. They were sitting in absolute silence, motionless, with their eyes fixed straight ahead. Nobody touched their cell phone. Nobody exchanged glances. It was as if everyone was anesthetized, frozen in time. A chill ran down my spine. I tried to distract myself by looking out the window, but outside there was only darkness and a dense fog that covered everything. The streets were unrecognizable. No sign, no known building. Just an oppressive pitch black, as if we were crossing a space between two worlds. At the back of the bus, a man in a hat was watching me. "Don't look away." The rigid posture, hands clasped on the legs. His face was partially covered by the brim of his hat, but it was impossible not to feel his presence. It was as if his eyes were going through me. I looked back at the window, trying to ignore that uncomfortable feeling. But it didn't happen. Time seemed to not advance. No stopping point had been announced, no sign that we were following an actual route. And still the bus moved on, deeper and deeper into that thick darkness. Little by little I realized that trip was not like the others, and maybe I never had a destiny. I sat in the middle of the bus, as I always do. It was my favorite place. Not too close to the driver, not too exposed at the back, but I soon realized that there was something deeply wrong with the other passengers. They were strangely still, staring straight ahead, as if trapped in a trance. Nobody looked at their cell phone. Nobody crossed their legs. Nobody even blinked. It was so silent that even the sound of my coat as I settled into the seat seemed too loud. There was a tension in the air, as if everyone was waiting for something. A silent, collective wait, as if they knew something was about to happen. And I was the only one who didn't know what. At the bottom, I noticed a man wearing a hat. He was different from the others. While the others stared forward like forgotten dolls, he faced me, directly. It didn't blink, it didn't deviate. His eyes, even covered by the shadow of his hat, seemed to hit me like blades. I felt like changing seats, but my legs felt strangely heavy. The feeling was as if I was being tested, observed. The fog outside was so thick that it completely covered what should have been the city's landscape. No plaque, no known corners. It was as if the bus was floating through a space that did not obey the normal rules of reality. The buzzing in the sound system grew louder, as if a radio station was trying to tune into something, but never could. There was a constant interference in the air, a noise that mixed with the sound of the wheels and created a dissonant soundtrack for that strange journey. I looked ahead. trying to see the driver's face, but the rear-view mirror was so dirty and fogged that it reflected only distorted shadows. Even so, I had the distinct impression that he was watching me back. The air started to get colder. With every kilometer, it felt like we descended deeper into some kind of forgotten dimension. Reality seemed more and more distant, as if the world I knew was being left behind. I thought about pulling the stop sign just to test, but something told me it wouldn't help. The feeling of imprisonment was intense. I looked again at the other passengers, not a single movement. A man sitting 2 rows away had a bead of sweat running down his face, and it wouldn't fall. She was frozen in time, like everything around her. I began to wonder if they were really alive, or if they were just echoes, fragments of something that once existed. The buzzing sound suddenly stopped, and the moment the silence became absolute, I felt my stomach drop, as if something was about to be revealed, as if I was about to stop being just a passenger and become part of it. A static noise cut through the silence like a blade, making every hair on my body stand on end. It was different from the previous radio hiss. This one had a metallic, almost lively vibration. The sound seemed to come from every corner of the bus at once, reverberating through the windows, the seat frames, even the floor beneath my feet. Then, in the midst of that noise, a voice appeared. Robotics, cold, no emotion. Welcome to the game. Find the one who was never supposed to be here before time runs out. My mind stopped. A game? What game? My heart accelerated immediately, and my body responded before my mind. I got up as if instinctively and went straight to the stop button. I pressed it. Nothing, no sound, no signal. I tried again. Empty. I ran to the front door and pressed the emergency lock. Useless. The lever didn't even move. The system was completely frozen, as if it were disconnected from the world. I tried to take my cell phone out of my pocket and press the call button. Black screen. No battery. No signal. Without any response. It was as if all technology had died in there. I approached the driver, shouting. I asked what was happening, who he was, why that message had sounded, but he didn't respond. It didn't move. He just kept his eyes fixed on the rearview mirror, as if he were waiting for something, or someone. My stomach dropped when I realized he couldn't see me, or maybe he pretended not to see. I looked at the rearview mirror, trying to understand what was holding his attention so much. At first, I saw nothing but reflections blurred by dirt and fog from the glass. But as I got closer, I noticed something wrong. My reflection was not normal. The image was distorted, as if my face was melting, my eyes were deeper, my skin was too pale. It wasn't just an out-of-focus reflection, it was a corrupted, broken reflection, as if it were being displayed through a mirror that didn't belong to our reality. I turned my head back, overcome by a strange feeling. The bench where the man in the hat was empty. Totally empty. No sign that anyone had been there. That paralyzed me. I knew he was there. He had been staring at me minutes before. I saw your eyes. There was no mistaking it, but now, nothing. No sound, no movement, no presence. I approached slowly, looking carefully around, trying to understand if he had moved, if he was in another seat. But the other passengers remained motionless, frozen as before. The bench still had a slight sink in the upholstery, as if someone had actually sat there, and a slight heat, as if he had left just a few seconds ago. My eyes scanned the bus, but everything seemed darker now. The fog outside seemed to be seeping through the cracks in the windows, and I felt, for the first time, that I was no longer a simple passenger. I was part of the game, and someone had just moved on the board. The overhead lights began to flicker as if the bus was losing power. For a brief moment, everything went dark. Absolute pitch black, as if someone had pulled the thread of reality. Then, with the same dry click that I had heard when I entered, they returned. But something was different. One of the benches was now empty, and I swear, there was someone sitting there seconds before. That man in the long coat, with his hands clasped in his lap. He disappeared. He didn't change places, he didn't get up. It disappeared, as if it had evaporated into thin air. The most terrifying thing was not the disappearance itself. It was the fact that no one reacted, no screams, no murmur, no look of fright. It was as if everyone already knew this would happen. The voice returned, now deeper, closer. 1 player eliminated, 7 remaining. Continue. The phrase cut through the silence like a sentence. That sounded like a warning or a threat. My heart was beating so hard that I could feel the vibration in my fingers. I tried to keep my breathing under control, but it was useless. My body had already understood that this was no ordinary trip. The terror was real. The game was real. I just didn't know the rules yet. And worse, perhaps no one knew. I walked slowly down the aisle, looking at the faces of the passengers. All properties. All with their eyes open, but without expression. I needed to understand what that was. Why me? Why now? And most importantly, what happened to those who were eliminated? The air inside the bus began to change. It became denser, wetter. A kind of fine fog began to form near the ground, like steam coming out of the vehicle's structure. I felt a metallic taste in my mouth, as if the environment was contaminated. With every step I took, the sound of the floor echoed loudly, contrasting with the absolute silence of the others. It seemed like I was the only living thing in there, and that made me feel even more vulnerable. I approached the empty bench, still warm, with the sagging upholstery, as if that person's body had been erased from existence. But the physical memory was still there, resisting. I reached out to touch, but hesitated. Something told me that this wasn't just a seat. It was a warning. The number 7 was playing in my mind. 7 left. If there was a count, there was also an order, and I was in it. This was a game, a deadly game, and I was on the board, even without choosing to play. My mind was spinning in circles, trying to find some logical, rational explanation, but there was none. The rules were not explained. The players didn't speak. The game master, that robotic voice, just narrated the other's downfall. It was as if we were being watched, tested, sacrificed. A part of me still wanted to believe it was all just a nightmare, but the empty bench in front of me said something else. This was real, and if I didn't quickly understand what was happening, I would be next. I went to the back of the bus, as if something was pulling me there. The seat where the man in the hat had sat still had a soft dip in the upholstery. It was hot, recently used. It was as if he had just stood up and evaporated into thin air. I looked around, expecting to find him standing or sitting somewhere else, but nothing, no signal. It was then that I noticed something shining on the floor just below the bench. I bent down and picked up a small pocket mirror, an old one with a slightly rusty metal frame. It didn't seem like something he would have left by accident. It seemed purposeful. A clue, a message, an invitation. I hesitated for a moment before looking at my reflection. And when I looked, I got chills down to my bones. It wasn't my face. At least not what I knew. It was me, yes, but aged. Sunken eyes, grey skin, blank expression, like someone who had already seen too much. The image didn't shake. It didn't distort. It was clear, detailed, horrible. Further back, in the reflection, all the passengers had changed. They were no longer immobile statues. Now they were looking at me directly, all at the same time. Their faces expressed neither anger nor pain, just a cold acceptance, as if they expected what would come. I turned, my body scared, but when I turned around, they were still again, as before, as if they had never moved. But I saw it. I know what I saw. And at that moment I understood. The reflection showed the truth, something that could not be seen with the naked eye. The voice echoed again, closer now, almost whispering in my ear, "You've played this before, but you never learn." That sentence paralyzed me. What do you mean, already played? I had never been through anything like it, but a part of my body reacted as if it recognized it, as if something inside me knew the path, the rules, the destination, a heavy, suffocating déjà vu, as if I were reliving a cycle. The mirror shook slightly in my hand. I tried to let go of it, but it seemed stuck to my fingers, as if it wanted me to keep looking, as if it weren't just an object, but a window, a gap between who I am and who I once was, or worse, who I always was in that game. I took a step back, almost tripping. The air grew colder, and the lights began to slowly dim, as if the bus was slipping into another layer of reality. I kept the mirror in my pocket, without knowing why. Something told me I would still need it. I walked back to my bench, trying to regain control of my breathing. My footsteps echoed loudly in the hallway, and again I felt all eyes on me, even if they were still. The feeling was of being judged by ghosts who already knew my fate. I sat down and closed my eyes for a moment, but the image of my aged face still burned in my mind. The mirror didn't lie. That was the truth. I've already been there, and for some reason, I came back. The bus slowly decelerated without warning. No stopping point, no street signs, just darkness swallowing everything around. The fog outside seemed thicker than ever, as if we were floating on nothing. The sound of brakes cut through the silence, and for the first time, the front doors opened with a long, strange hiss, as if they were moving after decades of disuse. The cold air rushed in, thick, almost solid, as if it brought something with it. I looked around, trying to understand what was happening, when I saw a seat in front, close to the driver, had become empty. I didn't remember anyone being there before, but now it was as if that space was reserved, and I knew deep down it was for me. The driver got up. The sound of the creaking leather of his seat echoed like a muffled scream. He slowly turned his face and looked directly at me, and I froze. My heart stopped. That was impossible, but there he was. There it was, you, older, pale face, deep circles under his eyes, the wrinkles of exhaustion marked like scars. His look was neither angry nor pitying. It was one of resignation, from someone who already understood everything and no longer has questions. He walked to the middle of the hallway with slow, shuffling steps, and stopping in front of me, said just 3 words. "Now it's your turn." The voice was mine, aged, painful. 1 sentence, a warning, a cycle. Before I could react, he turned and walked out of the bus, through the curtain of fog that covered the road. No shape, no direction. He simply disappeared into the mist, as if he had never existed. The doors remained open for a few seconds, as if waiting for someone who hesitated. Then they slowly closed. A sepulchral silence took over the environment. It was at that moment that the passengers moved. For the first time since I got on that bus, everyone turned their heads at the same time towards me, the eyes fixed on me. No expression, no words, but the judgment was clear. They knew. Everyone knew what was about to happen. I felt my body move almost on impulse. I got up and walked to the driver's seat. The chair was still warm. The steering wheel gleamed, damp as if it were breathing. The cabin felt tighter, as if it was slowly swallowing me. I sat down. The panel automatically lit up, revealing buttons I had never seen before. There was an envelope on, The panel. Inside, a paper with a new list of names, an itinerary, no recognizable address, no appointment, just next match, coming soon. On the back of the paper, scrawled by hand, it's not about leaving, it's about continuing. Outside, it's completely pitch black. Inside, everyone is waiting, and I, ready to start, even without knowing where it would lead. My steps towards the cabin sounded heavy, as if each one sealed a fate. When I finally sat in the driver's seat, the leather creaked under my weight, and something inside me seemed to click, as if deep down I had always known this was where I belonged. The dashboard lit up softly, illuminating the controls with a dull, almost pale light, like the glow of a dream about to turn into a nightmare. An envelope rested on the panel. No seal, no name, just an envelope yellowed with age. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside, a list of names I didn't know, but that seemed familiar, like whispers I'd heard in my sleep. And below the list, the name of the next stop, a place that didn't exist on any map. Before I could reflect further, the sound system came back on. But now, it was another voice. Not robotic, not the same as before. She was soft, almost human, but with a tone that bordered on irony. Line 13, departure authorized. The words echoed like a verdict. I looked in the mirror and the passengers were all in their seats. Real estate, expectance. They knew what was about to happen. They knew the cycle would continue. I took a deep breath and turned the key. The engine responded with a low growl, like the awakening of something very old. The outside lights came on, revealing the fog outside pushing its way in, as if waiting for us to pass by. And then, with a deep sigh, the door opened. Someone entered. The figure was hooded, its face hidden by shadow. I didn't say anything. He walked with slow, sure steps, like someone who already knew the route, like someone who knew exactly where to sit. He chose a middle seat against the window. He sat without looking at me. He just pulled the hood down a little more and rested his head against the glass. The same glass where, at some point, I also leaned, waiting for everything to end. But nothing ends. The time on that bus does not obey common laws. It doesn't follow logic or compassion. It just moves forward, just consume. And that new passenger had just taken his first step into the game. The board was assembled, the pieces in position, and I was no longer a player. It was part of the gear. The road loomed ahead like a tunnel of shadows. The fog slowly lifted, revealing signs that made no sense and landscapes that seemed to come from fragmented memories. I drove in silence. Behind me, no one spoke. But the weight of each presence filled the air like a constant whisper. The feeling that something was lurking beyond the headlights was inevitable. Still, I followed. Because that was my role now. To take, to drive. Start the next cycle. Maybe, one day, that new passenger will also hear the phrase, "Now it's your turn." Perhaps he also sees his own distorted reflection. Maybe he'll fight, but in the end, the game always starts over. Because on line 13, no one reaches their destination. Everyone just keeps going.